There is a specific, deeply ingrained American dream that we are all sold from a very young age. It is the dream of the perfect suburban sanctuary. You work hard your entire life. You save every penny you can, and eventually, you buy the perfect house in the perfect neighborhood. A place with manicured green lawns, highly rated schools, and neighbors who wave to you while walking their golden retrievers. You buy this house because you believe it represents the ultimate safety. You believe that when you lock the heavy wooden front door at night, you are locking the unpredictable, dangerous world outside. You are protecting your family. But what happens when the danger is not a burglar trying to pick your lock? What happens when the danger is a quiet, invisible presence that knows your routines, knows your secrets, and knows the names of your children? Welcome back. Tonight, we are going to explore a true story that will fundamentally change the way you look at your own home. We are traveling to Westfield, New Jersey. This is not a forgotten town with a high crime rate. Westfield is one of the most affluent, safest, and most desirable suburban towns in the United States. It is a place where nothing bad is ever supposed to happen. But on one of its most prestigious streets, a nightmare unfolded that shattered a family, tore a community apart, and remains completely unsolved to this very day. This is the chilling true story of the Watcher of 657 Boulevard. To understand the sheer psychological terror of this case, we have to start with the victims. Derek and Maria Broaddus were the quintessential, successful American couple. Derek had recently been promoted to a senior vice president at an insurance company in Manhattan, and Maria was a devoted mother to their 3 young children. In June of 2014, they finally achieved their ultimate goal. They closed on their absolute dream home. 657 Boulevard was a massive, stunning, 6-bedroom Dutch colonial built in 1905. It cost them nearly $1.4 million. For Maria, who had grown up in the Westfield area, buying a home on the boulevard was the pinnacle of success and security. The house was empty when they bought it. The Broadduses decided to do some renovations before officially moving their children in. They hired contractors to paint, update the plumbing, and fix the roof. Derek and Maria would visit the house every day, excited to check on the progress. It was a happy, busy time, but that happiness would last exactly 3 days. On the evening of June 5th, Derek went to the house to check the mail. Inside the black mailbox at the end of the driveway, mixed in with the usual junk mail and catalogs, was a single, thick, white envelope. It was hand-addressed in clumsy, block lettering. The envelope simply read, "To the new owner." Derek opened the envelope and pulled out a typed letter. He stood in the driveway, the warm summer evening air turning suddenly ice cold as he read the words. The letter began with a warm, welcoming tone, but within sentences, it descended into a dark, predatory obsession. The letter read, Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now. And as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out. Derek's heart began to hammer against his ribs. He looked up from the paper, his eyes scanning the quiet. The beautiful, large houses surrounding him suddenly looked like dark fortresses. The windows looked like empty black eyes. Someone, somewhere behind those windows, was watching him read the letter. He looked back down at the paper. The watcher knew specific, intimate details about what was happening inside the house. The letter continued. I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. TSK, TSK, TSK. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted. Do you need to fill the house with the young blood? I requested. Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me. The letter was signed in a cursive, elegant font, The Watcher. Imagine you are a parent. Imagine reading a letter from an anonymous stranger stating that they requested your children, referring to your sons and daughters as young blood and promising to draw them out. The psychological violation is absolute. Derek immediately called the Westfield police. The police arrived, read the letter, and were visibly disturbed. They advised Derek to lock the house, take his family, and leave. They told him not to mention the letter to any of the neighbors, because at that moment, every single person living on that street was a suspect. Derek and Maria contacted the previous owners, John and Andrea Woods, who had lived in the house for 23 years without incident, or so they thought. When confronted, Andrea Woods admitted that just days before they moved out, they too had received a strange note from the Watcher. But because they had lived there safely for over 2 decades, they thought it was just a bizarre prank and threw it in the trash. This confirmed one terrifying reality. The Watcher was real. They were local, and they were fixated on the property. The Broadduses immediately stopped bringing their children to the house. The massive, beautiful dream home was suddenly a contaminated, dangerous space. The renovations continued, but the atmosphere was completely poisoned. Derek canceled his work trips. He began driving past the house late at night, parking his car in the dark, and just watching the neighborhood, trying to catch the person who was watching his house. The hunter was trying to hunt the predator. 2.5 weeks later, the second letter arrived. If the first letter was a warning, the second letter was a psychological execution. The watcher had gathered more information. They knew things that could only be known if they were standing incredibly close to the house, listening to their private conversations. The second letter was addressed specifically to Mr. and Mrs. Broaddus, spelling their name perfectly. It read, "Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time, they will." And then the letter crossed a line that shattered Maria's sanity. The watcher listed the actual birth names and the private family nicknames of all 3 of their young children. "I am pleased to know your names now," the letter taunted, "and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. I have been watching them playing on the porch. The house is crying from all the pain it is going through. Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream." The watcher then mentioned a specific detail that proved the terrifying proximity of the stalking. They wrote, "Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now you are too." The police investigation ramped up, but they hit dead end after dead end. The letters were processed for DNA and fingerprints, but the results were inconclusive. The police focused heavily on the immediate neighbors. The layout of the houses meant that only a handful of properties had a direct, clear line of sight to the specific porch and windows mentioned in the letters. The primary suspects became the Langford family, who lived in the house directly next door. The Langfords were a local fixture. The mother, Peggy, was in her 90s, and she lived with several of her adult children, all in their 60s. They were considered eccentric, keeping to themselves. Their house slightly dilapidated compared to the multi-million-dollar mansions around them. One of the sons, Michael Langford, was brought in for intense questioning. He fit a certain profile but there was absolutely zero hard evidence connecting him to the letters. He vehemently denied any involvement. Without a confession or a physical proof, the police could not make an arrest. The Broadduses were completely abandoned by the system. The police could not protect them from a threat that had not yet committed a physical act of violence. Stalking laws are notoriously difficult to enforce without a clear physical danger. So, Derek and Maria took matters into their own hands. They hired private investigators. They hired former FBI profilers. They hired forensic linguists to analyze the writing style of the letters. They installed military-grade hidden surveillance cameras all around the property. They spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to secure a house they were too terrified to even sleep in. The psychological toll on the family was devastating. Imagine the profound, crushing weight of constant paranoia. Every time Maria went to the grocery store in Westfield, she looked at the faces of the people in the aisles. Is that the watcher? Is the person bagging my groceries the one who threatened my children? Is the friendly neighbor waving to me from across the street the one writing these letters in the dead of night? The safe suburban community had transformed into a massive, open-air prison of suspicion and fear. Derek became consumed by the hunt. He could not sleep. His health deteriorated. The dream of their new life had turned into a toxic, all-consuming obsession. Months passed. The house sat entirely empty. 657 Boulevard became a dark void on the bright sunny street. And then the third letter arrived. The tone of the third letter was entirely different. It was frantic. It was angry. The watcher was furious that the Broadduses had not moved in. The letter read, "Where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? I fear that they will never come." The watcher then began to issue subtle, terrifying threats of violence. They wrote, "I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not yours. My grandfather watched the house in the 20s, my father in the 60s, and now I watch it. Are you going to let a little fear ruin your dream home? Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day after day. You are despised by the house." And the watcher, Derek and Maria broke. They realized that no amount of cameras, no amount of locks, and no amount of private investigators could give them peace of mind. As long as the watcher was out there, their children would never, ever be safe in that house. They made the agonizing decision to sell 657 Boulevard before they had even spent a single night sleeping under its roof. But selling the house proved to be an entirely new nightmare. Word had leaked to the local press about the letters. The story of the Watcher house exploded, becoming national news. Suddenly, tourists and true crime obsessives were driving slowly down the boulevard, taking pictures of the property. The house was toxic. No one wanted to buy a multi-million-dollar home that came with a dedicated psychotic stalker. The Broaddus's tried to sue the previous owners, the Woodses, for not disclosing the first letter they had received. The lawsuit was highly publicized and deeply bitter, tearing the neighborhood even further apart. The residents of Westfield, instead of rallying around the victimized family, began to turn on the Broadduses. The architecture of a tight-knit community often involves protecting its own reputation above all else. People in the town began to whisper that Derek and Maria were faking the letters themselves. They theorized that the Broadduses had buyer's remorse, realized they could not afford the mortgage, and invented the Watcher as an elaborate hoax to get out of the contract or to secure a lucrative movie deal. The victim blaming was profound and deeply painful. Maria, a mother who was simply trying to protect her young children from a stated threat, was mocked online and ostracized by the community she grew up in. They were trapped. They were paying massive property taxes and a huge mortgage on a house they could not live in and could not sell. The financial drain was catastrophic, but it was nothing compared to the psychological ruin. Eventually, years later, the Broadduses managed to rent the house to a young family. Within weeks of the new family moving in, a fourth letter arrived. The Watcher was still there. The Watcher was still watching. The renter was terrified, but chose to stay, installing more security. Finally, in the summer of 2019, 5 agonizing years after they bought it, Derek and Maria Broaddus sold 657 Boulevard. They sold it for a massive financial loss, taking a hit of over $400,000. They moved to an undisclosed location, desperate to leave the nightmare behind. The case of the Westfield Watcher remains completely unsolved. The FBI, the local police, and top private investigators could never definitively prove who wrote the letters. Was it a jealous neighbor who felt slighted that they could not afford the house? Was it someone obsessed with the historical architecture of the property? Or was it something much darker? A genuine psychopath hiding behind the pristine facade of a wealthy suburban town, watching families through their windows in the dead of night. The new owners of 657 Boulevard have not reported any new letters. Some believe the Watcher finally died. Some believe they simply moved away. But others believe the Watcher is still there, sitting in a dark room behind drawn curtains, watching the new family, waiting for the right time to introduce themselves again. The story of 657 Boulevard leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality. We put so much blind faith in our environment. We believe that wealth, good schools, and manicured lawns create an invisible barrier against the darkness of the world. But evil does not care about zip codes. Obsession does not care about property values. The most terrifying monsters do not live in dark, abandoned forests. They live right next door. They water their lawns. They wave to you when you check your mail. And they watch you through the gaps in your blinds when you think you are completely alone. Tonight, when the video ends, I want you to walk over to your front door. Check the heavy brass deadbolt. Make sure the chain is latched. Then, walk into your living room and look closely at your windows. The glass is reflective in the dark. You cannot see what is outside, but ask yourself this terrifying question. When you are sitting on your couch, watching television, completely relaxed in your safe sanctuary, who is standing in the dark outside, watching you sleep well?